Let's continue our conversation with retired Army Lieutenant General Daniel Bolger, the author of the book, Why We Lost, a general's inside account of the Iraq and Afghan wars. General Bolger, you were on the ground there. You saw firsthand what was going on. Is there one anecdote, one experience you had in either Iraq or Afghanistan that typifies the futility and you say the defeat that came in our involvement there?
Yeah, I think what I would think about, JD, is the inability of both countries to sort out their government. You realize that in both Iraq and Afghanistan, the guys who ended up being the leaders for a long time, Hamid Karzai in Afghanistan, Nouri al-Maliki in Iraq, both lost their elections. In the case of Maliki, he lost the 2010 election. We let him maneuver his way back into power, and he had no goodwill for us. In fact, I believe he had a little too much influence from the Iranians, who were his old benefactors. Hamid Karzai, in 2009, basically stuffed the ballot box and beat another guy, Abdullah, who just ran in the recent election. In both cases, we knew that those guys were not legitimately elected. We knew those countries had trouble with democracy. I mean, you're a former congressman. You know that elections must be seen as fair and truthful, or the people lose faith in their government. Those were our partners. And when you got partners like that, you're hooked to a donkey. You're not going very far.
General, as you mentioned, the corruption on the part of those leaders in Afghanistan and Iraq, respectively. I can recall, because I was serving in Congress, when free elections were held for the first time, and people were going out, despite the presence of those who were trying to disrupt the process, attack the ballot boxes, deal with all of that, yet we saw people flocking to vote. And our perception on this side of the ocean was, here are noble people who want to be involved in self-government. Did we have it wrong back here at home?
No, I think or Japan or anywhere else. They want to determine their own future for them and their family. The problem is what they were electing were a bunch of crooks in many cases who wanted to go back to the old system. Saddam was gone and the Taliban were gone, but the idea that the guys in the capital would take care of themselves and their buddies, that wasn't gone.
Well, General, let's talk more about just how this played out. Earlier in our conversation, it seemed to me you were almost quoting the Eisenhower doctrine. Overwhelming force applied overwhelmingly and achieving objectives. Now, we put in place overwhelming force, but there seemed to be an incrementalism. I think back especially about Iraq and the delay in Fallujah. I guess the argument comes under economy of force. In retrospect, would it have been more merciful and more effective to absolutely commit to virtually total conventional warfare and a massive air campaign in Fallujah, rather than waiting and allowing the enemy to solidify its ranks there?
Absolutely, JD. I mean, you just quoted a guy who was a great president, General Dwight Eisenhower, but he was also a five-star general who led the Normandy invasion. He knew what he was talking about. I mean, you don't mess around with military force. You're going to commit the great men and women of our military representing the American people. You go in there hard and you finish these guys off, and you don't screw around. If you do anything else, like you said, it's not merciful to them either. Halfway measures result in halfway results.
About a minute left, General. How do you reconcile the notion of flexible response, a light footprint, special forces against these extra-national, these different factions such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda? With about 40 seconds, is there a place for a light footprint and flexibility?
Absolutely. And the Eisenhower administration were the guys who pioneered that with the efforts they took in places like Guatemala and in places like Lebanon and Iran. That's exactly right. Because to the enemy, who's just a few terrorists working in a cell, the arrival of that SEAL team or CIA team is their worst nightmare. It's the equivalent of getting hit in the face with a sledgehammer.
Well, Army Lieutenant General Daniel Bolger, we do appreciate very much your insights. Again, the name of your new book, Why We Lost, a general's inside account of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. General Bolger, again, we thank you for Skyping in this morning from North Carolina's capital city of Raleigh. And I got to say, from my vantage point, go Wolfpack.